How big of a deal is this that Bob Bowlsby has levied these accusations?
It's it's frankly remarkable to have. I've seen a lot of stuff in my time in realignment, but I've never seen a commissioner accuse his. This isn't some unrelated party. This is his direct. ESPN televises Big 12 games, pays them a lot of money to do so, and he's accusing them of trying to destroy the conference. It's amazing, and whether it's just posturing or whether he actually has this proof that he claims he does, I think it kind of signals where the conference is headed, what the conference's strategy is from here, which is okay. It's too late to get OU and Texas to not join the SEC, but what we can do is do everything in our power to make sure they have to stay for the full 4 years and pay the exit fees that they owe. And this clearly was the beginning of that strategy to try to say, and I don't know if it's valid or not, that the ESPN and AAC are colluding to try to, keep that from happening.
Well, another part of it too, and I know it was one of the initial tweets that came out yesterday, was Oklahoma and Texas using proprietary information from meetings within the Big 12 to then take to Sankey and the SEC. And, Greg Sankey, who, by the way, is on the expansion committee with Bowlsby the whole time this stuff is happening too. I mean, how big of a deal should that be? I guess, I'm sitting here from the perspective of, look, like in K-State, Manhattan, a place where I've grown up. Football program is why I'm doing what I am doing right now, falling in love with K-State football. We're sitting here like, hey, how come nobody seems to really care that much about this? It just feels like the national reaction to it has been somewhat flippant and just more memes and jokes about the Big 12. When that to me seems like pretty serious stuff that's being alleged.
But the way I put it is, people are asking me all the time now, radio interviews and whatnot, is this good for college football? And my answer is, it will be good for the average kind of casual fan to be able to watch Oklahoma play Alabama or Texas play LSU or Auburn. Like, we're all going to watch those games and it'll be exciting. But is it good that it comes at the cost of 8 fan bases? A little ago, right? Kansas State fans had no reason to think anything other than, we are a Power 5 school. If we have a good season, we might win the Big 12 and go to the playoff. And then 2 days later, you're hearing, hey, you might have to go join a conference with Tulane, and you're never going to make enough money again. I mean, that's terrible. And it's just, it's not the first time something like this has happened. It reminds me of when the ACC raided the Big East, and that eventually fell apart. But the difference is, that took years to unravel. Like the time from when Miami left the Big East to when the Big East had to become the AAC, that was like 8 years. This was like, snap your finger and the Big 12 is toast. And I feel nothing but empathy for Kansas State fans and fans of those other 7 schools.
So much of this is like, I referenced like the birth lottery. Like, look, I could have been born in a third world country. I happen to be born in an affluent suburb of Kansas City. South Carolina happens to be in the southeastern portion of the country. They're attached at the hip with the SEC. K-State's not. I think that's the frustration. And then you see, it's just the way a lot of the media has handled this too. Like, there's so much grave dancing that goes on there. And to me, it feels different than like if you're celebrating a win over somebody. Maybe this is just my beef with Oklahoma and Texas media here at this point, but that's one thing. But there are so many lives that are going to be affected by
right
potentially happen here. And there's just a lot of, whether it's treating it flippantly or tweeting out a meme or whatever it is, there's a lot of that happening right now. And you have some really, really raw feelings that are out there here at this point.
Well, I felt that when last night after the Bowlsby stuff, and now Bowlsby's accusing them of trying to come after all 8 teams. And I said, look, whether it's the Big 12 that takes those teams, or the AAC take, like, clearly both sides want the same thing. So why don't they just merge? And Big 12 fans were not happy with me because they don't like the idea of going to what is currently considered an inferior conference. My counter would be, just change the name. It's the same conference either way, but I get it. I mean, it's a huge ego blow. This happened to, Cincinnati won the Big East in 2009, undefeated season, number 3 in the country. And 2 years later, they didn't have their conference anymore. Like, this is really, realignment's just a ruthless game.
What to you is the best case scenario then, and how all of this plays out for the remaining 8 schools here that are sitting kind of laying in the weeds right now?
Well, it's better for them if they can keep stick together, keep the 8 schools together. At the very least, that's going to take care of the next 4 years where you're still going to have the same status you have. And everybody's going to get paid when those 2 schools leave. But I just have a hard time believing that's how it's going to play out, because for 2 reasons. One, it's going to be miserable. I mean, I always hear every time schools leave conferences, you hear about how miserable that last year was when they were a lame duck. We're talking 4 years. You're telling me every call that goes against them is going to be a conspiracy theory. Every road trip is going to be just nasty. So I have to think their lawyers are furiously figuring out how to get out of it early. And then, it's easier said than done to say, okay, well, 8 of us, let's sign a pledge. We'll stick together. We'll make the best of this. Inevitably, somebody is going to get, cold feet and want to jump at the next opportunity. So if they can actually all stay together, at the end of the day, the saving grace here is the 12-team playoff. And we don't know when it's coming, but when it does, theoretically, even a depleted Big 12, if you win that conference, you're probably going to be in the 12-team playoff. It's the top 6 conference champions, and they will still be one of the top 6 conferences. And so that's kind of the saving grace. But obviously, that doesn't solve the fact that your TV contract is going to be much less next time without OU and Texas, and some of the other things that go with that.
And you did a lot of research on the TV numbers, in a piece there that, I mean, it was very sobering.
It was.
If you're a fan of one of the 8 teams that's left, because it was like a 90,000 person difference basically between AAC games and games between the other 8 teams in the Big 12. I mean, what does this mean? Like, what the Big 12, I know I've seen the number floated, like they hope they could get up to 20 million if they were to expand and add some teams from the AAC. Is that in any way realistic? Like, what are we talking about here for numbers realistically?
I mean, if you can, and I know it's, I mean, this article, I mean, I got a lot of backlash from fans of those schools, and I don't blame them, but the data says what the data says. And basically they, on a school by school basis, they're not going to be that valued that much differently than an AAC team is now. So then you say, okay, what are AAC teams making from television? They're making $7 million a year. Not much compared to a Power 5 conference. Now, I'm not saying that's what those Big 12 teams will get. The market is always increasing for live rights. And, some of those programs, once I sorted it out by school, it's like, oh, okay, Oklahoma State actually does pretty well on their own in the games, but they're not playing OU or Texas. They're not all the same. So, when I looked at it, I thought, well, the Big 12 is making $24 million a year per team on television right now. That's part of the whatever it is, 36 or 37 million distribution. I think your best guess is that it's going to be cut in half. So you're talking a range of like 7 to 12 million per team, and then you're going to see, you're not going to get as much playoff money or NCAA tournament money just because you're not going to have the Oklahoma and Texas appearances. So it's not like fatal, but it's like, it's going to mean you might have to cut some teams, or you're certainly not going to be able to pay coaches anything close to what the SEC or the Big Ten pay their coaches and so forth.